All right, well, thank you everybody for being here today, and a big thank you to Mike for making this place available to us, this lovely workshop full of exciting big machines and parts and transmissions of big trucks. This is Heartland small business actually, and actually small manufacturing too, because as Mike said, he makes some of the tools that he uses here and makes parts when he can't get them in or whatever he has to do. We're here today to just announce our small business package, and I've got with me our small business spokesperson, small business and manufacturing spokesperson Andrew Bailey, and also the finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith, our candidate here in Rongotai, David Patterson, who's actually a tax lawyer, and we also have Nicola Willis, who's a locally based MP in Wellington, and Nicola also has the education portfolio. We know that we are about to go through, and some already are going through, very tough economic times at the moment. And we understand and know very well that most business in New Zealand is small business, and that we have so many wonderful small businesses like this that actually get things done, make things, and actually help make businesses elsewhere productive. You can't go too far with a business that's having to transport goods if your engine isn't working, and that's why these engine transmission rebuilds are so important. But we are here to talk about some of the specifics, particularly around the issues around tax, and I'm just going to find the right page for this for you so I can give this to you. Small businesses in New Zealand do need to get around, which is why infrastructure is such a part of our policy. But in terms of today, we can announce that the small business package has 5 parts: a lower tax cost and compliance for small businesses, fairer employment law for smaller businesses, better cash flow for smaller businesses, because anyone who's been in small business knows cash is king, cash flow is king, less red tape for small businesses, and better access to capital for new and existing small businesses. Looking at the tax system, for a start, we will not be increasing taxes or introducing any new taxes. We give you absolute certainty about that. We will lift the threshold to expense new capital investment from $5,000 to $150,000 per asset, and that will give businesses like Mike's here the confidence to invest in better machinery, newer machinery, better technology, and that's true all over New Zealand. This will really help businesses. We will increase the provisional tax threshold from $5,000 to $25,000, and we'll raise the compulsory GST threshold from $60,000 as at the moment to $75,000. That will certainly help many small businesses. And our policy document has a number of other tax changes to benefit small businesses. Right now we've got over 200,000 New Zealanders who are receiving the job seeker benefit, that's the unemployment benefit or the dole, and better employment law and incentives for job creation will help businesses take on new staff, and we think it's very important to get people off unemployment benefits and into work wherever it is possible. So National will provide a $10,000 cash payment to businesses that hire additional staff, as well as our commitment to keeping New Zealanders in jobs using our Job Start policy. And we will repeal the government's changes to the Employment Relations Act that discourage job creation and add costs to businesses. Cash flow is critical to small businesses, and only half of all businesses are cash flow positive at any one time. When large businesses do not pay their bills on time or in a timely manner, then small businesses with limited working capital are the ones who suffer. And National will help small businesses by guaranteeing that all government departments and government agencies will pay their contractors on time and within 7 days. That will help bigger businesses. And we will establish a small business payments guarantee, a voluntary initiative committing large New Zealand businesses and not-for-profits to ensure that New Zealand's small businesses are paid on time and within 30 days. Excessive regulations hamper competitiveness and reduce productivity, so we want small businesses to thrive and not be strangled by red tape and bureaucracy. So we will repeal the RMA and replace it with straightforward environmental standards and a Planning and Development Act. We will simplify anti-money laundering legislation by providing guidance to industry via a national policy statement and also to comply in a less costly manner while continuing to meet our international obligations. And we will initiate a review of WorkSafe 5 years since its inception to ensure it is focused on delivering a high-performance culture with an emphasis on collaborative and reasonable approach to health and safety improvement. Access to capital is one of the biggest issues holding back small businesses in New Zealand. National wants to remove barriers that are limiting the access to capital for new and existing businesses. To improve access to capital, we will do two things. One, we will allow New Zealanders who have lost their jobs to access up to $20,000 from their KiwiSaver to start a new business, plus an additional $10,000 in tax credits. And we will encourage KiwiSaver providers to invest a small portion of their total funds in appropriate private equity expansion capital opportunities involving New Zealand companies. In conclusion, we understand the importance of small business. We know that with a thriving small businesses, New Zealand will be much better off. We need to make sure New Zealanders keep their jobs, keep working, keep contributing, keep involved in the workforce, keep being positive and helping us get through what is looking like a very difficult economic time. So we have a plan for small businesses, and it is all around reducing cost, uncertainty, red tape, and helping to grow the economy. Thank you very much. Happy to take any detailed questions.
What is the end goal, particularly of the tax compliance stuff? Is it increased productivity?
Who wants to answer? I'm happy to talk to that. Absolutely, it's very important to do that, but also understanding that when some of the tax thresholds were put in place, that was some years ago, and since then it's become increasingly difficult for some people to be able to function with it. So if you look at you might want to talk to this, or what? Actually, your revenue. Yeah, revenue. There are so many people who can talk to it. The cost of, for instance, the cost that people are having to pay for the use of money interest to IRD. That's if you're a bit late with a payment because you've underestimated your provisional tax. That's what, 7.1% at the moment?
7%.
Yeah, 7%.
So some of the issues are about just reducing the cost to businesses in terms of meeting their tax requirements, but also some of them are about allowing companies to take deductions like the $150,000 tax depreciation. What that means, you can offset the acquisition costs in the year that you acquire it, means that you don't have to pay tax on the profit because you've reduced it by that amount. That means a cash flow benefit for businesses, small businesses. So part of it's about reducing compliance costs, but the other thing is about getting cash back into these businesses, which they are so desperate for at the moment.
So what difference will that make to the tax take?
All we're doing is basically bringing it forward. So those businesses could have already depreciated them, but under a slower depreciation regime or a slower rate. And what we've done is just fast-track that and said rather than do it over 4 years, you can do it in 1 year if it's up to $150,000.
Do you want to add to that, Paul?
Look, I mean, there is a
We're in the same bubble, by the way.
There's a slight cost to the government in the sense that the government doesn't get the money as quickly, and the reason for that is to make it easier for those businesses that are strong who can invest, to encourage them to invest faster. And to drive the recovery that we need in the economy. So it's one area there. The other areas are it's all about trying to reduce hassle and compliance for small businesses. And so there's a lot of little thresholds that haven't been changed for a long period of time that we want to lower or increase so that small businesses have less hassle and less red tape.
I think it's also important too to remember too is that if a business is going off and they spend $150,000 on a new piece of plant, that will often be from another New Zealand business. So that money's coming around basically it's coming around in the economy and it's keeping people employed. Thomas.
Thank you. The first time the $150,000 threshold was raised, you announced that it was a temporary change, I think. Is that change now been made permanent?
No, it's for 2 years as an emergency measure, but we'll review that in government, and if we find that it is really making a huge difference, we could carry it on. But at the moment, it's 2 years.
I think a lot of the announcements in the package previously been announced. Is there a reason why you're re-announcing stuff that's been trickling out for a couple of years now?
Well, I don't think there's quite a few of the smaller tax announcements that are quite specific to small business. So there's about 6 of those. They haven't been announced before, Thomas. So they are part of helping with businesses protect their cash and actually to facilitate them and to allow them to get on with doing business.
So the GST changes are new, but the depreciation stuff is
Well, they're all part of an important small business package, which is, I think, more and more relevant now than ever, where we're losing tens of thousands of jobs. The real generation of new jobs in the economy is at that small business level, and we want to do everything we can to make it easier for those businesses to hire workers and to grow and expand.
So just two examples. One is the write-off of fixed assets. So if you look at anyone's fixed asset schedule in their accounts, they have pages and pages of small assets. What we've just said, at 5,000 you can write it all off. That means that they get cash. Effectively, they are protecting their cash because they take that write-off in the last year of that asset. So that's one measure of protecting cash. The one around provisional tax payment time, we are going into summer in a few months' time, and for most businesses a 31 March date, to be able to not have to pay your provisional tax in January, but to defer it to late February, very, very helpful. These are issues that small business owners actually is very important.
Do you stand by the changes to the Employment Relations Act in terms of bringing back a 9-day trial? I mean, before coronavirus we had fairly low unemployment. It didn't seem to make much of a difference. Do you think that will really encourage people to hire again?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Ask any small business owner, they're really frightened of not being able to employ people or find that someone is entirely unsuitable and ending up in a court. I mean, they're really worried about that.
You'll repeal the entirety of the changes to the...
No,
not all of
no,
it.
we're not going to. But I think you also, there's some nuances which I don't think you've picked up on perhaps. So, for instance, if you talk to any small business owner, one of the big issues, if you want to get rid of staff who's poor performing, you basically have to write out a cheque for 10,000. We've got this practice in New Zealand that if you go to a tribunal, you know you're going to get probably 20,000. It's ingrained now. What we're trying to say is, look, let's make sure that process is fair. If someone has been made redundant for a proper reason, they should be paid out a proper redundancy. But there's some cases where that happens. So we've got an industry now, no fee, no pay. So those types of changes, again, if you ask small business people, they are actually very, very important to them. Now, so we're not just talking about the issue around unions, and there is an element of that. We want to make sure it's a fair workplace, but actually what we're talking about is targeted specifically to business owners and their staff.
Allowing people to access $20,000 of their KiwiSaver, will there be checks and balances around any business plans in order to do that, to make sure people aren't sort of wasting away their retirement?
Yeah, it has to be. They first have to go through and have an approved plan with a financial advisor, and then that's the next step. And again, that is an emergency measure as well. We're all conscious of the importance of KiwiSaver, but we're at a time when there's going to be thousands of people made redundant, and this is one way that we can help people who have lost their jobs to create new businesses and start. It won't be appropriate for every person, but there will be some people that this will be really helpful for.
Great.
Yeah, those are aspects where they've been prescribed. If you were to talk to Mike with his staff here, I'm sure Mike would say, well, actually, we agree when we're going to have a smoko, and it's actually quite logical, because if we're in the middle of doing that transmission there, and we've got 5 minutes to finish the job, we might just delay morning tea. At the moment, it's prescribed in the Act. That just gets contrary to how small businesses work. And I think the biggest issue with the government is that they do not understand that small businesses are made up of wonderful business owners, like Mike as an example, and we've met some of the other people here. They have a deeply personal relationship with their staff. Mike was just talking about a staff member. Is not just an employee, they are deeply personal relationships. And some of the issues in the Act are written in a way that prescribed and prescriptive. That's not how these workplaces work in small businesses.
The review of work site.
Yes, that's really important. As you know, I am deeply committed to health and safety in the workplace, but it is also important to understand that WorkSafe has only been in place now for about 5 years, and it is important that we review how that culture is working. Are the prosecutions that should be being done, are they being done? Are there prosecutions that shouldn't be done? Is there any bullying by WorkSafe or of WorkSafe staff? So I've certainly been into a business recently where we had the business owner saying that when WorkSafe, this particular inspector, came to visit, first thing they got was, you understand, I can close you down. And that is not the culture that we want. And that's not the culture we would expect in the police in New Zealand. It's certainly not the sort of culture we want in a workplace environment. And there's many businesses feel very suspicious of WorkSafe, when my view would be WorkSafe should be there to help people do a better job, not to use those sorts of bullying tactics. So it's really important. I know many WorkSafe inspectors who really try to do the very best, and of course, you know, I will have a niece who is one of those. But it's really important that we make sure that people have the right culture. And I've also been concerned around the lack of any oversight of WorkSafe's practices and policies, and that's something which we expect the New Zealand Police to have oversight from other agencies. It's important that we make sure we get this right, because WorkSafe working well will help health and safety and help businesses to do the right job better. It will keep workers safe. WorkSafe not doing it well will actually be a hindrance to both.
Do you have any messages to hospitality businesses, particularly small ones in Wellington that are already struggling with the low levels of people around town?
Yeah, it's actually, I really am aware of that, that we've got, even in this level 2 lockdown, a lot of small businesses in hospitality in Wellington are really hurting, and partly it's because a whole lot of the public servants are working from home and are not coming into work, even though they are able to do so in some cases. But I'd also say to them, understand this package will help them too, because it is actually about freeing them up to be able to get on with their jobs. But you know, I'm doing my best for the hospitality sector. I'm sure many of us are, but I've been in hospitality. I know how hard it is. And I know that you're running a business where people turn up one day, they don't turn up another. You've got a lot of uncertainty, and the last thing they want and need is for a government to come along and make everything more uncertain. But, you know, keeping the border safe would be one of the ways we can avoid lockdowns. And even though we haven't seen any COVID-19 in Wellington this time round, you know, there's a level 2 lockdown. Still means I can go to work, but it makes it real hard if a whole chunk of the population here aren't going to work.
Just on COVID-19, we're expecting announcements today on the use of masks, in particular with school students and so on. What's your thinking on where that should land?
Well, the evidence that I've heard is that children aged 12 and over are more likely to be transmitters rather than those under 12. Now, that is the medical advice that I've heard from Dr. Shane, but I think it's also, I'm not against using masks in places where you've got people in close contact and they're all running around and things. I mean, that could be difficult. I certainly use them in the cars where I've got other people with me. But look, I think it's, you know, we'd have to take the advice on it for school kids. I guess if it was my kid in the school, I'd probably err on the side of caution. But they'd probably think I was an overprotected mother. That's because I am an overprotected mother.
And what about this $11.7 million for this green school?
Oh, well, I think we've got Nicola Willis will speak on that one. Do you want to come forward, Nicola? Yeah, come up there.
Well, look, it's an extraordinary
Come up there,
decision.
Nicola, you take my place, yeah.
Frankly, rank hypocrisy. That amounts to around $200,000 per student on the roll of that school. And it's impressive, one, because it seems to contradict government policy, but two, because there are schools lined up across the country who would like additional school property funding and who have been unable to get it. So it's an extraordinary decision, and I'm calling on Minister Hipkins to front up and explain how this decision was made.
When you say it contradicts government policy, whose policy are you talking about?
Well, for one, the Green Party policy has stated that they don't believe in public funding for private schools, and yet James Shaw seems to be the key cheerleader for this project. For two, the government has for some time opposed public-private partnerships for even the building of schools, and yet this is not only a private builder, it's a private school. These will be privately held assets. They won't be available to most New Zealanders. With fees of $20,000 per year, I can't imagine many families in the Taranaki will be bowling up to attend.
So why do you think it got funding?
Well, that is a question that Minister Hipkins must answer. He must say how it sits with government policy on independent school funding, how it sits with property funding policies, and why it is fair. Because I have already been on the phone to the principal at New Plymouth Boys High School, and he said to me, well, Nicola, should I just say that I'm going to build a green hut and then will I get the property funding I want? I've had other schools write to me saying we are desperate for more school property. What do we have to do? Call it the Green Party School? So these are fair questions and the Minister must answer them.
And he signed it off, hasn't he? As part of their rules, he has to have signed that off.
Well, the shovel-ready projects require that ministers in affected portfolios are consulted. So we would expect that the Minister for Education would be consulted about funding for a school. Why did he sign off on this?
It's likely the government will say, though, that the objective is to create jobs. The objective is not about school buildings.
Well, you give me $11.7 million and I will find you a queue of schools who will create construction jobs if they're given money to do a building tomorrow.
Exactly.
This is no unique circumstance. There are community groups, churches, schools around the country who with that kind of money could create some construction jobs tomorrow and would also create educational benefit for many New Zealand school children, children with additional needs, children with high priority needs. But they are not tailored to by this policy. This policy is for an exclusive group of students at a private school.
It's rank hypocrisy.
Rank hypocrisy.
The government might also say that, in terms of the shovel-ready project issue, the idea was around getting jobs that were, shovel-ready literally, so that there were not other projects at other schools ready to go, and hence this one.
Well, just round the corner from this school is New Plymouth Girls High School, which many years ago had its performing arts centre burned down. It would replace it tomorrow if it had the funding. Nearby is New Plymouth Boys High School, who would like to replace their boarding hostel for students there. They would get building on that tomorrow, but the funds haven't been made available to them. They want to know, what is the story with this school? What kind of a deal has been done that it means gets special access to funding that appears to be in contravention of government policy? Minister Hipkins has to front up and explain.
What do you want to happen now with the money to be handed back?
I want Minister Hipkins to answer questions about how this decision was taken, how it sits alongside other government policy, and frankly, why it's justified. How is it fair, given schools up and down the country are crying out for additional property money? He has to explain and he has to answer those questions. That's what I want to
I
see.
think you'll be seeing him at 1, won't you? You can ask him then.
On that issue of public servants working remotely, how would you, on that issue of public servants working remotely, how would you deal with that? Is it a matter of the SEC reversing the onus to say, instead of saying, work from home where you can, work at the office unless you're unable to, or
Yeah. Well, it's a very good question, Sam, because clearly people have to put safety first. The issue is that if the border had been managed properly, we wouldn't be in lockdown 2. It is yet another, basically these small hospitality businesses and hospitality generally in Wellington is being hit by the fact that there has been an incursion either through the border or apparently magically, the immaculate infection. So, obviously the government needs to find out what's happened and they need to be held accountable for the fact that businesses are losing their jobs. And the last thing they need from an uncaring government towards small businesses is to be told, oh, it's only another couple of working days, you can go without the wage subsidy. So I announced that the wage subsidy should be extended for the term of the lockdown for across the country where it is having this effect. And I've said if the government finds it too hard to do the admin work on making it 4 days, it's actually 4 days, then we just make it a week. So there's another thing I would say for those small businesses. But the government needs to get its act together on border management. If it can't run the border, I have a team who are very happy to run it.
the issue of public servants, that's necessary even of those upstream problems.
Well, that's what's happening, is that is it, and that's the reality for Wellington business. I'm not criticising the Wellington public servants. I am, however, saying that this is one of the fallouts that people don't always understand, that there's an ongoing fallout, and it's not the business's fault, and it's not the public servant's fault.
We've been told that the systems that create the wage subsidy are actually, it's difficult to make them kick in for even less than 1 week, and the minimum amount of time is 2 weeks. So based on that commitment you just made, would you be willing to say, hey, 2 weeks for those extra 4 days?
Well,
that's the minimum amount of time.
But you know what, Thomas, I don't accept it's difficult. Governments all the time put difficulties or challenges up for government agencies to cope with. When I look at the difficulties that small businesses in particular, and even larger ones, are going through at the moment because of a government failure at the border, how about they just sort themselves out in the government? I mean, if they don't know what to do, I tell you, we've got a team who could make it happen. I've been the Minister of Revenue. I've dealt with issues where, you know, agencies have had to turn things around. MSDs had to turn things around very quickly. You know, it is tough. I tell you what, it's really tough seeing your business go out the door, die, because the government can't be bothered sorting itself out.
Is the government doing enough to secure New Zealand's access to a COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, I saw that the government has today announced that they are putting money towards that, but they won't say how much because of commercial sensitivities. I have to take their assurances that they are, and certainly I've discussed the issue with Dr. Shane about how the whole vaccine supply chain works and how you've got to be basically in the game to be part of the consortium that receives that. You have to do what you have to do when it comes to a vaccine. I'm sure there are also people working here as well, but it is important that if at all possible, that New Zealanders are not the last people to get a vaccine. We may be one of the most remote and isolated countries in the world, but we shouldn't be the last people to get a vaccine, because I will certainly be signing up to get one if I meet whatever criteria they put in place, and I'm sure I do. Thank you. Mikey. Oh yes. Oh, yes.
Have you watched the case over the last few days, and what have you made of it? And also in terms of the question of deportation.
I'm happy to talk about that, yes. So obviously he's still subject to sentencing, and so even though we're not in government, I think I'm always wary about that. And when it comes to deportation, it's really tempting to say deport him to Australia to serve out a sentence. The problem with this, and I looked at this before when I did have ministerial responsibility for such issues, is that Australia has, when I last checked, around 900 New Zealanders serving sentences in Australian jails. Australia has always been keen to send us those 900 during the term of their sentence, not even waiting until they're finished. That would mean that New Zealand would either have a whole lot of criminals who have not served their sentences wandering around the community, or else we'd have to find jail space for them. I'd be very wary sending him back at the moment. On that is one practical reason why not. The other thing is his appalling crime has been committed in New Zealand. We do need to, I think, make sure that he serves all his time that he's given today, and that any parole hearings or anything else, should he be granted any possibility of parole, that they be dealt with here, where we feel very strongly against this man and the utter outrage that he's committed. As for those people, the witnesses who have been, or those who have been reading their victim statements, can I just send a big hug, actually, collective hug to them. It is a really tough time, and they will be reliving everything going through those witnesses' statements, both writing them and then reading them. But I know that they will feel much better for having had an opportunity to say what they want to say. And I've certainly heard that from many victims over the years. It's really tough doing it, but they'll feel at least we've been listening. Thank you.
Should be sentenced to life without parole.
Well, it's very tempting for me to say what I think just about everyone in New Zealand would agree with. The issue is it's up to the judge. And I just think we need to be very wary of, as politicians, getting involved in that. But I'm sure you can guess what I think.
Will you accept the sentence, whatever sentence that judge hands out?
Well, it's not for me to say otherwise. It's for the Crown will have to decide whether or not it appeals or otherwise. But of course, he is also has appeal rights on sentencing, so I don't want to make it easier for him to appeal anything.